Okay, now we get into the fun stuff, all right? Tips for when you're doing gluten-free baking. I want to tell you this. You gotta have a sense of humor. Gluten-free baking, until you get the hang of it, you're gonna make a lot of mistakes, okay? Just get ready for it and laugh. You know, for a new baker, when you're using regular flour, one of the properties of gluten is that it gives dough. Think of like pizza dough. You know how if before you bake it, it has stretch to it, or if you break a piece of bread or a cupcake, it has like that little bit of like not gumminess, but it has that moist, tender crumb inside of there. That's what the gluten does. It actually holds it together and gives it stretch and pliability. With gluten-free flours, they don't have that chemical property to them anymore, and so you need to create that same kind of stickiness and binding that you would have with regular flour. So for the beginner, it can be very frustrating sometimes. Be patient with it. Once you get the hang of it, it becomes very second nature. You'll have no problems. So here are some of my suggestions. Number one, know thy oven. Right? If you're using convection, if you're using regular conventional oven, learn where your oven's hot spots are, because with gluten-free, this is my experience, with gluten-free baking, it makes a huge difference in terms of not only the temperature, but also the duration of baking and whether or not you need to be rotating products halfway through and making sure that they have equal heat circulation so that some of it isn't burned and some of it is still raw. On that same note, one of the other things that can help set you up for success when you're actually baking the stuff is using parchment paper. You might feel like a total priss if you're using it, but your pan actually will cause a lot of variability in how that product actually turns out. So if you have baking pans that were passed down from your grandma and they have those like charred marks on there that never come off no matter what Martha Stewart says, or you have brand new shiny pans, or you're using the darker colored nonstick pans, those cause huge variability in how your product actually comes out. So I found for me that one of the best ways to ensure reliable, great quality product every single baking time, whether you're making cookies, whether you are making something in a bar like a brownie, or even when you're making cakes, is to line the pan and grease the parchment paper as well. So handy little tip right there. All right, now we move into this whole concept with gluten not being in there. Our products don't have that stretch. One of the first mistakes I made when I moved to gluten-free, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I went to the store, I bought this stuff. It said all-purpose baking flour on there. I only knew regular wheat flour, so I made cookies. They still had eggs, they still had all this other stuff in there with the regular Toll House recipe and this. Okay, so I made the dough, everything looked good. I've been baking for years and years. I put them in the oven. And about 7 minutes went by and I smelled something burning. And then the smoke alarms in the house went off. What is going on? Oh my God, I opened up the door and it was as though the cookies melted. Like, all you could see on the pan, you just saw chocolate chips and then you saw this puddle of what was cookie dough. What is this? It's like dripping. It's on the bottom of the oven. It was funny. I was aggravated, but it was really funny. So when stuff like that happens, it still is going to taste good, right? And this is going back to like what your mom told you when you were young. You know, what about the starving kids in China? Don't waste any food. So when stuff like that happens, be prepared. It's okay. What I did was I let it cool and dry and it turned into like rock hard. And I took a spatula and scraped it off and I used it as ice cream crumbles. It still tasted good. It was not a formed cookie. But I went and did some research and found out, why did the cookie dough melt? And it's lacking that binder. So one of the key ingredients is going to be a binding product called, it's a gum, all right? The one that I've had the best success with is called xanthan gum. And you want to be careful in case you have a corn sensitivity that some of the xanthan gums, I think in the manufacturing process, they're brushed with corn or something like that. So you just want to be sure. But our good friend Bob assures us that his is not. And xanthan gum, are you ready for this? It is made from the outer layer of a tiny inactive bacteria. All right, that's where xanthan gum comes from. But what this does, this is what is going to give your cookie batter or whatever, it's going to keep it together and hold it. There's actually on the back of this packaging, there's a little chart to give you some guidance, and then you'll figure it out. You know, how much do you actually need? All right, a little bit goes a long way. It seems like it's a huge investment. It's anywhere from like $11 to $13 per bag, depending on where you buy it, but it lasts forever. And you have to keep it in the fridge in an airtight container. So you need the xanthan gum in there, unless your flour, all-purpose baking flour or whatever, has xanthan gum in there already. So make sure that you're reading to see, do you need an additional binder or do you not? Okay? Another thing with gluten-free baking, it seems to me it always requires more flavoring than traditional. So sometimes this can be 3 times more. There's recipes where I've used 6 times the amount of vanilla that I would use in a regular glutinous recipe. So if the finished product is coming out a little bit flat, you may just have to go up on your seasonings, all right, and flavorings. So just expect that. And then if you decide to move into an egg-free scenario, this can be an additional challenge for people. We do cater to those allergen free foods in our baking line, and one of the traditional standby, simple to make and easy tolerated on people's stomachs and their allergies, is using flax as an egg substitute, believe it or not. So again, reference, I'm going to get a job for Bob. I should be one of his salespeople. All right, so Bob has this stuff, and make sure when you're reading the label, whether or not you buy Bob's, you want to get it so that it's not seeds. You need to have them busted, you know, broken down into meal. And so all you're going to do for every egg, all right, I'll come up close here so you can see. This is hard to do when you're filming by yourself. All right, I don't know if you could see that. Where's the stupid lens? There it is. Okay, so it's kind of like sawdust. 1 tablespoon of that, 3 tablespoons of hot water, and let it sit for like 5 minutes. It starts to thicken up. It looks kind of nasty is what it does, but this is actually an egg substitute. Okay, so dump it in. You can use 2 eggs, 3 eggs as you would normally, just use the flax instead. Okay, that's all I have for you with this session. We'll see you back here for another tip.